Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to go over the spawner system for items, vehicles, and AI. It's pretty easy to do. All we need to do is go into our brush tab and we search for the spawners folder, which is here, object spawners. And in here we have all the different spawners and all the different spawn classes we use in the game. So if I wanted to add item spawners to the house I created in the previous video, I can go ahead into this folder and find what kind of items I want. So for instance, this one, random backpack, maybe I want a random backpack to spawn on the sofa. Maybe I want this random consumable. Add some random consumables around. And spawn, those will spawn in different consuming items. There's all sorts of different ones. Random eyes, which are the glasses, and so on. They're pretty self-explanatory. Random maintenance is some of the car parts like batteries and spark plugs. Lubricant is the oil used for car, and then there's also one for fuel as well. And there's random melee, and then there's random ranged, which is random ranged weapons, smoke grenade, weapons with mags or a weapon on its own, and then there's also random military, which spawns military gear, and so forth. So if I want to add these to my house prefab, I can place down all these spawn cones, and just select them and select the prefab as well. Then go prefabs, add selected objects to prefab, save. So now these are added into the actual prefab file. So any instance of this prefab will have these item spawners in them. So what you can do is, like, if you want to make a garage or something that just has car parts in it, you could just put the random maintenance, random fuel, random lubricant into the garages, and those will spawn car parts. If you want more residential stuff like consumables, clothing, you can just add those to your houses. Or if you want to add weapons, you add weapons and so forth. All these spawn classes are all defined in Lua, Lua, or XML in the game files. I'm not going to go into detail how to modify those, but you can modify the spawn rates or add items to the spawn cones in those script editors. So that's item spawners. I'm going to go to my examples that I've placed in the corner down here. And these are all the different vehicle spawners. So I have an example here of all the different vehicle spawners that you can place around your map. So maybe we want, say, a random bicycle. So we want a bicycle to spawn here on the map, and that's it. So when you run the game on your server, the server will know that there's a spawn cone here, and it will look up that spawn script and it will spawn a bicycle here. And I think if you have more spawn cones than the amount of vehicles you can have, it makes sense. If there's only 5 bicycles and then there's 10 bicycle spawn cones, it will pick the random 5 cones to spawn those on. And that's what we do in islands, on Orca Island as well. In Miscreated, we have multiple vehicle spawns for each class. So when the server starts up, they randomly spawn in any of those areas and then hit the limit and stop spawning. When a vehicle is destroyed, it will pick another random cone to spawn on it as well. So there's all the different classes here. You've even got water vehicles like jet skis and boats. It's best to put those in the water, obviously, spawn those in the water. So that's how the vehicle spawners work. maybe you've noticed in the entities tab, you can see there's vehicles, and you can get a vehicle like that. My do not do is use entities as spawners or item spawners. Do not use entity class as them. Use these spawner cones, because when you run the game into on your server, having these entities on the map, it's not efficient for the server for one thing, and it could cause crashes and all sorts of other issues. Do not use these entities. You can use them in the editor if you want to test a new gun that you've modded in the game, or you want to test a gun that's in the game already. You can find it and look it up in the entities, and you can use the item that way. But when you export your level, you don't want any of these entities present on the level or exported to the level. So that covers items and vehicles. We move on to AI, and it's the same sort of principle again. So brush, spawners, and then you find the different AI spawns that we have. So brute, brute armored, hunting pack, the brute pack, and then there's also spiker pack and spikers, the human spider, deers, and you also got the pig, the rooster. So you will find them all in this folder. I've put them all here for you as well, so you can see what those look like. So you can set up where different types of animals or different mutants spawn, and they will spawn with those cones essentially. And again, don't use the AI in the entities tab, because of what I just mentioned. It's the same thing with vehicles and items. Just do not use these entities. Use the brush spawners. That way the game will be optimized and spawn in these AI classes as they should be spawned in. So when you're setting up your level and you want, you know, deer in certain section, you just put the deer spawners around. I would recommend putting quite more than you expect, basically. So so it just keeps the game a bit more random, and it keeps the AI spawns a bit more spaced. So yeah, you can make it, you can add like loads of brute spawns if you wanted to make an area harder, or you could add deer in the forest and make that like your hunting ground area, or you can add bears in the forest, and that's where you find bears, and that's where you get bear pelt from, or you know, or wolves, and that's where you get wolves from. And then pigs and roosters you can put in farms or wherever you want, and that's where you find pigs and roosters. It's really up to you, but this is how you add spawns for those different AI classes. And again, they're all defined in the Lua or XML files for those spawn classes. So once you've got your AI placed down, you would want to generate a AI navigation mesh. Now with the level template, I've already set up a AI zone, which is this box on the start content AI layer. You have this box, and the name has to be kite nav bounds 1, and that defines the AI navigation area. And I do believe if you put, we make an area, so to make an AI nav area shape, and we can also define our rivers and lakes that we created. I'm just going to do this quite rough. And we want it same. Oops. I'm going to call it nav bounds 2. Reset the height on that. To kind of see where this area is filling, we can click on display build. So we don't want example, any AI walk in the water, because you'll get these instances where you have a deep river and then they think they can walk through the river and they'll walk underwater, and it looks really silly, stupid. So you want to use area shape to find out all your rivers and call it kite nav bounds and then a different number at the end. Change the height of it. Well, let's put it on like 30, and that will exclude the AI nav mesh generation in this particular area. So that's a good way of defining areas where AI gets stuck and you don't want them to generate in that area or try go in that area or go into underwater or anything. That's how you would do it. I don't think the same applies for ocean. I think that's just excluded automatically. So once you've got your AI areas set up and you have this basic one, this whole global one on the outside, we need to run a command to generate this AI navigation mesh. So we need to type in, I've wrote in here, type in kite generate into the console to generate AI navigation mesh. To save the navigation mesh, enter kite save tiles into the console. So we can go kite generate, and now it's generating the AI nav mesh. If we double click on the console, we get this console variables box. If we type in kite, CYT, and then we can draw the master by changing this value from 0 to 1, and that's showing like which tiles it's generating. And then you can draw the nav mesh, click 1, and this is a very cool visual. So you see this grid, and you can see it going through like a lawnmower, kind of up and down the level. And this is the navigation mesh which the AI can see and will walk through. So when it's generating it, it automatically excludes and defines walls and buildings, so it will know when there's a tree in the way and it will cut around the tree. It will know when, for instance, if I put a, let's put a house. So if I put this house here, oops, put it where it's generating already. There we go. So you can see, well, as it generates, it automatically detects the house that's in the area, also detects the inside and all the surfaces, everything in it. So the AI knows that that building is there. It will walk around all the walls and it can know where it can walk and where it can't walk and what's in the way and what's not in the way. So that's all automatically generated when you run this command. And then we can turn that off actually. So once it's filled with this entire thing, it kind of lags. So we can turn off the mesh. So now AI will roam in those areas that's generated. So once it's done generating, you should get a box that says AI navigation mesh has been generated, and then you click OK, and then you'll type in kite save tiles, just like I've got here on this comment, into the console. And what that will do is in the levels, so my level, it will save kite nav bounds dot mesh, and this is your navigation mesh for your level, and you'll need that when you export your level for your server, and when you run the level for your server. So it bakes the whole navigation mesh and saves it on a file, so when the level loads, it doesn't have to generate these tiles on runtime. It'll just use this, and that's about it. And that's how you get the AI nav mesh in and have AI running around. If you don't do this step, then the AI will just stand perfectly still and do nothing. So you need to do this step if you want AI to navigate your level. And that covers it for spawners and AI. Thank you for listening.